going to talk a little bit about the science of B2B targeting, B2B marketing, and then Vin's going to follow me with the art of personalization. Now, you guys can decide whether art is better than science or vice versa. I am an engineer, so science always works, right? My wife's an artist, and she says engineers are crazy. So I think we can go either ways. But I'm going to spend the next supposedly 50 minutes, but I'm going to try and keep it a little shorter, talking about B2B marketing, targeting, and so on. And given that this is a pretty intimate gathering here, I'm going to not hold the questions for the end, but let's just kind of keep going, ask questions as we go along. If I know the answer, I will tell you what it is. If I don't know the answer, I will fake something, or I'll just say pass. Okay. But over the next 20, 25 minutes or so, I want to talk about three things. I want to talk about how B2B marketing is becoming more and more digital, and I think that's kind of close to all of us. And I'm going to talk about how becoming digital means being able to bring offline and online together, and that's pretty interesting as well, and we're seeing more and more instances of that. And I'm going to talk about how data is the one that is the glue that brings B2B marketing together, brings the offline and the online together. But first, we will start with the fact that B2B marketing is going digital, right? And by the way, does everybody agree that it's going digital? Yeah? Okay. Let's assume that it is. Now, yeah. Now, I think Pat mentioned something about B2C a little while earlier, and that's true. B2C is considered this snazzy, you do all this fancy stuff when you're running B2C marketing campaigns. You can use some of the best tools out there. You have great amount of data available. And you have ways in which you can reach people and you can measure what's going on. And you can do a lot of things in the B2C space that traditionally you've not been able to do in the B2B space. However, we are at the cusp of that revolution. We are now getting to a point where B2B marketers are using digital channels more and more. And they're doing that because B2B consumers or the companies that they're selling to are getting to a point where they are interacting with the marketers in the digital channels more than they are interacting with them in the physical channels, right? So there are a bunch of different statistics that we've seen around, the consumer journey or the buyer journey in the B2B space is almost completed before they actually interact with you in person. A lot of companies that are buying your products, if you're a B2B seller, have already made their decision before they even come to start talking to you. And so it's important for us as B2B marketers or as platform providers or data providers that service the B2B space to get to a point where we can enable the B2B buyer to have that experience, the experience that he or she wants, right? And as the B2B buyer is moving digital and they are getting to a point where they want to interact with you in those online channels, in those quote-unquote digital channels, we as the providers or as the marketers of B2B systems need to become digital ourselves, right? And we see that there are more and more B2B marketers that are now using account-based marketing methodologies that are using data to drive insights, that are using a bunch of different ways in which they can basically bring platforms together, right? We see many instances where the B2B marketer is now using different platforms. The marketing technology stack is becoming bigger and more complex. And we have to figure out how, as we enable them or as we as marketers use those stacks, what are the best ways for us to be able to work across the different parts of the stack, right? So you have numbers here. You have 85% of B2B marketers are using data and analytics to improve performance. And I think we were speaking about this just a little while ago, Neeraj and I, and we were talking about how the fact that you have data available now allows you to make many more decisions than you could in the past, right? The fact that you can bring in feedback loops and that you can decide what is working and what's not working, and in almost real time make changes to your campaigns to affect the efficacy that you've seen from your data, it kind of changes the world, the way you run your marketing campaigns. And as we as we go along and as we say that, yes, the B2B marketing, the B2B world is becoming more and more digital, there is a dichotomy to it. And the dichotomy is that even though the B2B marketer is getting more and more into the digital channel, the offline channel is actually very, very important for the act of conversion, right? So while we have the marketer moving digital, we also have an increasing instance where events and direct human interaction is extremely necessary to have that conversion happen. So we are now in a place where the digital part of the world and the physical part of the world have to kind of come together. And in the B2C space, it's gone so far towards the digital side that it's almost, marketing is kind of synonymous with digital marketing, right? You don't say digital marketing and offline marketing in the B2C space. However, in the B2B space, there are still both of them, and you have to factor both of them in. Sometime back, I was talking to a group at the Adobe conference in Vegas, and I was talking about this concept of digital immigrants versus digital natives, right? So I think the way I describe it is that a lot of the B2C marketers or a lot of the marketing programs being run in the B2C space are basically run by these, young up-and-coming people who are executing these campaigns, running these media programs and so on, and they have basically grown up in this digital space, right? To them, digital is native. Like the first thing they think of when they think marketing is digital. However, when you look at the B2B space, the complexity of the B2B organizations, the way decisions are made in there, and the fact that every B2B sale is so much larger from a dollars and cents perspective as against the B2C sale, means that the people that are making decisions in the B2B side are typically the people who have come up the ranks from the old school days of marketing, if you will, which means that the decision makers in the B2B space are more what I call digital immigrants. Digital doesn't come naturally to them. Everybody around them is talking about it. Their people, their company, their team is talking about it, so they know they have to be digital. But if you go to shake them and wake them up in the middle of the night and ask them about something about digital, they'll have no idea what you're talking about, right? So we have these digital immigrants and these digital natives, and the B2B marketing space is the one where they come together, because the folks who are actually running the campaigns and who are actually making these, execution decisions on the B2B side are the natives. They are the young up-and-coming people who are doing this, but the decision makers on them are immigrants. So you've got to kind of maintain that balance there. And that's what we see when you look at the numbers in the B2B marketing space. While digital is becoming bigger and bigger, offline is equally important. It'd be very difficult for me to find an instance of a large B2B company or a large B2B organization that is fully digital. And I can very easily find many, many instances of large B2C companies that are fully digital, right? So as we look at that, we realize that the marketing function in the B2B company, while it is digital, physical, and so on, is also changing in the way that with the advent of ABM, with the advent of account-based sales development, and so many of these other technologies that we are bringing to fore, the marketing team within a B2B company is no longer just a lead gen kind of team. The marketing team, it becomes more of a growth driver kind of team. You're no longer expecting a marketing team to just say, okay, here are my 50 leads and Mr. Sales Guy, and I'll go ahead and figure out how to actually close them. The marketing team is expected to find the right 50 leads and figure out how do we actually generate the exact leads that the company is looking for. And therefore, the function of the marketing team becomes more of a growth driving, and we move the marketing function kind of, if you look at the funnel where you have the sales funnel going from top to bottom, and then you have the marketing funnel kind of upwards, inverted sales funnel, the two lines are kind of blurring right now. Where does marketing stop and sales begin is up for grabs now. We don't know exactly where it sits. And what we see is the marketing function kind of moves from becoming a pure funnel-driven approach to more of a continuous cycle-based approach, where you identify, you attract, you target, you nurture, you sell, and you go right back into that loop, right? And we'll come back to this a little bit later, but I wanted to bring this kind of wheel, we call it the marketing wheel up there, just to put it in your minds, and then as we talk more about how marketing is evolving and what's going on with marketing, we'll come back to this wheel. Now, as we were speaking about digital marketing in the B2B space and talking about the fact that there is this immigrant and native and the offline and the online, what this basically means is that connecting the offline channels with the online channels is becoming more and more imperative for the success of the B2B campaign, right? And it is, if just making that statement kind of seems very blah, but the reality is that a B2B buyer journey is very, very simple, right? It's hardly got any stages in it. You just start from the beginning, go to the end, and it's all done, right? So you have about 25 different function points, if you will, and that simplistic journey spans across the digital channel and the physical channel. A few things to note here. One, that journey spans multiple channels. Two, when a B2B sale is happening, the sale touches many, many different points of the organization as against a B2C sale, right? A B2C sale, if you're trying to sell a shoe to somebody, you're selling the shoe to somebody. When Nike tries to sell me one of their new sneakers, they just want to target me. If Nike is smart, they'll target my wife because they know she owns all the money, so she's going to buy it. But in any case, it's either me or my wife. However, when you're trying to sell, let's say, cloud services in an organization, right? You are talking on an average to about 7 or 8 different departments within the organization. You're talking to about 4 or 5 different people within each department. And so the number of touch points that a B2B sale has is way more complex than the number of touch points that a B2C sale has, right? Now compound that with the fact that the amount of data available in the B2C space is way more than the data available in the B2B space. You now have a situation where you're trying to manage a buyer journey across all of these touch points, but you don't have a way to connect the different touch points of the buyer journey easily together, right? And to solve for that problem is the thing that we're all striving for, which is how do we make sure that things which start digital, you have somebody coming to a website, then become physical or kind of physical because somebody is getting an email or so on, and then it's 100% physical. They're coming to an event and they are actually closing the sale. How do you know that the person that saw your ad was the same, or the company that saw your ad was the same company that responded to or opened an email, was the same company that came to your event and eventually was the company that bought? And that's the question that we're all always striving to solve for. Now, in today's world, it's become a little bit easier than what it was before. And it's become a little easier because you have the possibility of creating a stack. You're creating a technology stack that sits across all of this and allows you to drive the campaign or drive the user journey or the user engagement the way you would want to drive it, right? And this is just an example of a stack. And as you can see, there are a bunch of different pieces to it. There are a bunch of different platforms and technologies that come in here. And these are just random examples, by the way. It doesn't mean that this is the only thing you can use. But as you see here, when you start as a B2B marketer or as a company engaged in a B2B function, when you are looking to build an experienced buyer journey, when you want to make sure that however your buyers interact with you can easily be managed and controlled and in some ways measured, you want to make sure that you have a way in which you can stitch the different elements of the stack together, right? It's very easy to run each of these different verticals, if you will, by themselves. But the problem with running them by themselves is you don't have any understanding of what is it in one part of the stack that's actually driving value to the next part of the stack. And how do you make sure that you can continue to drive value all the way through till you come to the actual end of the buyer journey, right? And this stack spans both the digital and the physical world. And this stack spans a bunch of different platforms, both vertically and horizontally. Now, one of the ways in which we believe that you can bring this, rationalize the stack, if you will, is by using data in different parts of the stack, right? If you have a way by which there could be a persistent identifier that sits in each of these components, right? You can use that identifier as a means of actually stitching the data together. And if you can stitch the data together, you can then measure it, and you can figure out what is working and what's not working, right? So in our world of offline and online, having a data element that can sit both offline and online is one way to ensure that you can actually maximize the efficacy of a stack that you have running. If you don't have that data element, right, or if you're basically running your campaigns in some kind of a haphazard fashion, if you will, then you'll end up with frustration, I guess, right? I mean, I think most marketers in the room here would be pretty conversant with these numbers. We have many instances where you executed a campaign for a certain, with a certain intent in mind, but what actually ran was very different from what you intended. Your reports came back and they showed you something completely different from what you had actually started down the path of doing. The question becomes, was it the failure of the actual campaign? Was it the failure of the targeting piece of the data? Was it failure of the way in which you ran the inventory that you ran against? Was it the platform itself, the way it was bidding or the way it was executing the campaigns and so on? But the one way to understand what is it that is actually working or not working is to be able to get the right data assets to sit in different parts of the stack, right? So if over here, we are talking about 70% of the marketers are either unhappy or marginally happy with marketing automation. Now, why is it that they are unhappy? And more often than not, if you dig deeper and deeper into what is it that is actually causing a failure in a part of the execution, it more often results in the actual data that's being used for the execution path, right? Or if there are inconsistent data sets, then what you thought was your prospect or what you thought was your customer wasn't exactly what you'll end up getting. So as we are trying to bridge these offline and online worlds together, we know that we have to get to a point where data is the glue that will actually bring all of these pieces together, right? By the way, everybody agrees with everything I'm saying? I mean, I see nodding heads. Okay. It's nice when everybody agrees because at home, that never happens, right? Never. Whatever I say, it's always, yeah, you're wrong. But here it's nice. So we talk about data. We talk about data is something that we know we can use, something that we want to be able to maximize the use of to run effective campaigns. Now, data comes in different shapes and forms and a lot of different ways in which we actually use it. But what we have here, and I bring it back to the wheel that we spoke about, different parts of the wheel require different ways in which you work with your data assets, different types of data assets that you actually want to use at those points. So if you think about being able to identify, attract, and engage accounts, you start with the business intelligence that you need so that you can identify the right account. And for that intelligence, you require the right kind of firmographic data or demographic data and so on. So I'm not going to go through every single data element out here, but the point on this slide is that there are a varied amount of data sets that are available. What is important is figuring out what is the right data that you want, what is the quality of data that you're actually looking for. Different use cases require different quality of data assets. If you're running a very generic open-ended campaign for targeting as many people as you want on the internet, you can go with relatively low quality data, if you will. If you're running a highly targeted ABM campaign, you have to have the best quality data that you want. So again, data is not the same for everybody. It just depends on what you're actually looking to do. But as we talk about data not being the same, the other thing that we do realize is that most times within our own companies, within the actual marketing ecosystem that we have a lot of gaps in the data itself, right? So we believe that, this is my CRM file, and I'm going to use that. It's my first-party data asset. That's the best thing that I can possibly use. What I have in my CRM tells me who is my most valuable customer. What I have in my CRM shows me who's the actual customer that I want to go after. But more often than not, when I look at my CRM, I'll find that I have 100 records, 30 of them have no company name in them, or maybe 30 of them are the same company name, just spelled a little differently, right? And then sometimes we have a contact address, a name, sometimes we don't. So one of the things that we absolutely need to do is figure out how do we maximize or how do we fill up whatever our data elements are, how do we fill them up so that we can have the best data set available for the use of our targeting needs, right? And as we fill it up and as we start using, now we have a data asset that we know we can use, that becomes the underlying layer to that stack that we spoke about earlier, right? So if you walk through the stack, the first portion of the stack, if you will, you have somebody coming, an anonymous visitor or somebody that comes to your website and interacts with you, right? If you have a way to actually identify that anonymous visitor and link them to a business, now you know that there is a specific business that came to your site. It's no longer an anonymous visitor anymore. And if that business was in a certain portion of your lead funnel or of a sales funnel, now you know how to interact with them. Although the visitor is quote unquote anonymous, if they expose, it could be an IP address, it could be a cookie that you've actually written to them, or it could be a bunch of different ways in which you identify them as a business. If you can do that, you now have a way of actually taking some kind of a definitive action against a visitor that was quote unquote anonymous before. Now, once that user has come to the site and they have fed in some information into a lead form, if you will, that form goes into the marketing automation platform, right? And the data from that form goes into the marketing automation platform and can be used to drive personalization. If you did not have the data beforehand to tell you exactly what was that business coming to your site, and if you did not have enough data to validate the information that was made available to you through the form, your personalization programs are not going to run that well, right? So if you look at data again, it is data from the anonymous side now becoming a quote-unquote profile for you to actually run a personalization campaign against. Once you've taken the data in, the next step that you want to do is now you want to be able to outreach. You want to reach out to those people that have kind of interacted with you already. In this example, we use Eloqua here. So you take the anonymous data that was collected, segmented that out into companies that came to your site. Maybe you can go out and get contact names associated with those companies, and now you can start reaching them through the email channel, if you will, right? So again, if you did not have the underlying data that allowed you to create these segments, you're not going to have an effective email program running over there. Once let's say you ran the email program, somebody saw an email, they clicked on the link, and they landed up to your website. How do you validate that the person who landed up to your website is the person that you were trying to reach? If you have the data in the backend that allows you to validate that, that helps you make your email campaign a lot more effective. And so on. Eventually, you get to a point where you have that lead that was validated, and you have some engagement that happened with that quote-unquote prospect or customer, and that then went and fed back into your CRM system. And now you're back into that whole loop where your CRM file that maybe was not fully formed in the very beginning, if you have cleansed and matched and enriched the file itself, you now have a data asset that you can actually use for running those campaigns that you've always wanted to run, right? So the point I'm trying to make here is that data across all of these parts of the stack allows you to build this cohesive story that you want to be able to take out to the market, to your customer or to your prospect, and enables you to run the program the way you want to run it, right? And when we think about using this data, right, I'm going to end on this part here so that Win can then take over the next part, which is how do we use the data to make it, to run the personalization aspects. But as we think about the data and we think about taking data across the stack, the way we think about it is in what part of your marketing spectrum, if you will, are you engaging with the customer, and what is the kind of data asset that you require for that? So the way we see this, again, based on this wheel, is the first thing that you want to do is you want to be able to understand your data assets and optimize them, right? It's kind of funky the way we do it, but let's start with audience optimization first. You have your CRM file, you have your, the data set that you will about your customers and your prospects. You want to make sure that that is in the most optimized state possible. Once it is optimized, which could be cleansing, matching, enriching, appending data sets to it, the next thing you want to do is you want to be able to profile that into, or slice and dice it into a bunch of different segments that mean something to you. So you want to run a campaign that is targeting high-value customers. You want to run a campaign that's targeting Fortune 100 companies or whatever that might be. You basically want to create a bunch of different segments or profiles that you will then use to run very intelligent targeting use cases, right? So you will optimize your data, profile it out, and then run targeting against it. And once you've done that, and you've started now reaching out to the companies or the prospects that you want to, you then get them into your sales funnel, and you run a whole sales acceleration program against them. The data is the glue that kind of holds all of this together and basically helps drive that intelligent targeting, if you will, or get the customers to your site. Once they come to your site, or once they actually are your customers, the next thing you want to do is you want to figure out how you can actually personalize their experience and make sure that they become, customers for life. And Vin's going to talk to us about personalizing that experience. If you have any questions for me, Vin will answer them.